Video calls have become such a normal part of so many of our classes these days. As remote learning continues to move forward, we're doing video calls with our students a lot of times. We're doing those whole group ones. We're doing them in small groups. We're doing all sorts of video calls. And so let me ask you a question. Have you ever considered taking your students someplace cool on one of those video calls? Or have you considered having a guest, somebody new, come in and join you on one of those video calls with your students? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, because those video calls that you do with your students are fertile ground for lots of really, really cool activities and really neat experiences that you and your students can be a part of. And so we're going to be talking all about that this evening. I want to welcome you to our video, to this live chat we're going to be doing about virtual guests and field trips. My name's Matt Miller. I am the author of Ditch That Textbook, and I have the fabulous Gina Ruffcorn with me, who I think is just the person that you need to hear from if we're going to be talking about this. So, Gina, would you mind giving everybody the quick who you are and what you do?
My name is Gina Ruffcorn, and I teach 5th grade full-time at West Harrison Community Schools in Mondayman, Iowa. We're a tiny little rural district. I'm the only 5th grade teacher there, and I happen to be a Skype master teacher also, one of the original founding Skype master teachers, clear back from 2014, so it's been a while. So my kids have been exposed in my classroom to many virtual field trips and many opportunities to reach out, meet other people, discuss other issues, understand why their situation is unique to them and what makes that cool, and then understand how different other people's situations are and why that's really interesting also.
Excellent. Very good. And so, and you know, just from that introduction, I think you can see how this is such a good fit to have Gina join us. So if you're watching this live, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you along with us. We'd love for you to check in the chat. So just drop your name, your location, and your role in education, and we'll throw some of those onto the screen. So we'll be checking in with you as we get going on this. You know, this is really, I think, one of those cool things that not a ton of people are doing in the classroom face-to-face, but also remote learning also. And so, you know, we're going to be talking about how this can all fit and how it all works together. So let's say hello to some friends that have joined us real quick. We got Todd Shriver from North White in Indiana. Yeah, Todd's a good friend of mine, and he is a fantastic resource. We could have had him on as a guest too. He's done a ton of video calls. So Todd, I'm looking for you to drop a bunch of comments in here so I can throw them up on the screen. We have Ditch That Textbook live video champion, Katie Short, who is in lots of my videos. She loves Gina's hair. And so
thank you, Katie.
Yep. And she's a grade 7 teacher. We have the fantastic Laura Steinbrink from Missouri joining us, as well as Evan Mosier from Iowa.
In the house.
Yep, who is a big fan of Gina, apparently. Brandy Green, there's another regular face there. Well, not totally face because it's covered up by a camera in her picture, but she's from Oklahoma. Liliana is here from Bogota, Colombia. Bienvenidos. We've got Patrick here from Melbourne, Australia. Wow, we are hitting up the countries here. We've got Canada, we got Colombia, we've got Australia. Excellent. Monica Spillman's here. She's from Tennessee. We've got Hawaii covered today. Susan Dixon's here. Welcome. Beverly's here from Georgia. Larissa is here from San Luis Potosí in Mexico. Bienvenidos. And we've got Mary Lee Dahl from Miami, Florida. Excellent. Wow, we've got quite a group here. This is fantastic. And Laura says, Gina taught me and my students how to do mystery Skype after I saw her session on the Ditch Summit, which is awesome.
I thought the name sounded familiar.
There you go. There you go. That's right.
All about the connection.
So since we are here to talk about virtual guests and field trips, virtual guest speakers, virtual field trips in remote learning, but we'll also talk face-to-face also. Let's get this conversation kicked off like this. And I know that this question will work for definitely for a handful of the folks that we have joining us already. And the question is this: tell us about your favorite video call experience with students. Now, If you've never had a video call experience with students, that's fine. We're going to dream for a second. Who would you get, or where would you go with your students in that video call if you could at all? So Gina, I'm going to kick this one over to you because I know you have lots of them to choose from. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these video calls with students over the years, right?
Yes, so many that it's tough to even remember some of them after a while. And so picking your most favorite is kind of difficult. There was one, and I'm not doing the cheetah one. There was one where my kids had a session with an elephant sanctuary, and we were studying biomes and science. And so we had done a call with an elephant sanctuary, and my kids were so completely enthralled by the idea that here was this lady standing there with this elephant behind her, and she was the regular handler for the elephant. And so she stood there and talked to the kids, and it was all so interactive and it was so live. And the kids were asking questions about, oh, how long is the elephant's trunk? And she's like, well, let's get a tape measure and we will actually measure the elephant's trunk. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so then she said something about his tail. And so we measured the tail and we measured the trunk, and she picked up his foot and we measured across the bottom of his foot. And so we did some conversions then from regular units of measure to metric units of measure. It was absolutely amazing. And when we started the call, I really thought, okay, this would be good for biomes and elephants and where elephants live and things like that. But I really wasn't expecting it to go where it did. And the fact that it branched off like that meant so much more to my kids, that they could say to the lady, well, how big is the elephant's foot? She would actually pick up the elephant's foot with the yardstick and measure right across it. You couldn't get any more authentic than that. It was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. And I know lots of folks that I've talked to that have done that very virtual field trip have had such good experiences. I remember, I think it's our mutual friend, Mike Soskel, that had a group of kids. He had a group of boys. I think there were 4th or 5th grade boys who did this elephant sanctuary virtual field trip, which, by the way, I'm going to put this one up on the screen real quick so that you can see what it looks like. This is, if you go to the link that's displayed at the bottom of the screen right now, this is what it will look like. And so you can see some of the pictures. And so what happened with Mike was he went on this elephant sanctuary trip with a bunch of 5th grade boys. And so the person that's on the trip, you know, has the camera up in front of his face, kind of selfie style. There's an elephant over his shoulder, and he's talking and he's talking. And all of a sudden behind him over his shoulder, the elephant pooped. And these 5th grade boys are like losing their minds. They're like, oh, did you see that? Oh my goodness. And of course the guy realizes what's going on, and he's like, oh, you want to go check that out? And so what do? They walk over there because the boys showed interest in the elephant poop, and they talked all about elephant poop for a little bit. So,
well, sure, you never know where you're going to go.
Right, exactly. Which is the joy, you know, the beauty of these kinds of things. So I want to see some of the things that have popped into the chat here. I know we've had a couple of them. Oh, by the way, before we get to Todd's comment real quick, hi to Tatiana from Central Jersey. Brandy's here from Texas. Bill is here from Michigan. There's Christa from Michigan also. And Carly is here, who hashtag I love Gina. Yep, you and me both. And then we've also got Robert here from Hong Kong. Oh my goodness, we are really hitting up the countries here today. This is great. All right, so let's do this one from Todd. He says, thanks to Google Meet and Skype for allowing me to record interviews with Kyle Cook of Matchbox 20, Alan Hunter of MTV. He was one of the original video jockeys. And Billy Joe Hewells of the Dusty 45s with my music teacher, Mr. Hoover. Todd is one of these really, really interesting stories where he's had a variety of different classes over the years, social studies classes, and he's just asked a bunch of people to to come into his class, and a lot of people have said yes. And I think he's an excellent example of that. So
be amazing.
Yeah, very cool. Katie says if she could do it, she'd love to have the parents involved. Oh, I like that. Yeah. And have them talk about their passion. This happened a bit already as we get used to online learning. And Gina, don't you think this would be a really accessible virtual guest for just about any class. I mean, kids have adults at home with them, and if the adults wanted to join and talk to your class, that would be a really easy first step to get into virtual guests, wouldn't you think?
I would think so. There was a session I was in this afternoon with Wakelet, and there was a teacher on there who said that she had put a challenge out to her kids to talk to their family about family histories and what made their families unique. And they had done a whole Wakelet collection about that. So yeah, that would be amazing if you pulled a collection like that together and then let the people call and talk to other children about their family histories and share those things back and forth. Sometimes that stuff just isn't getting passed down anymore. Those family historian roles kind of blur and drop off the wayside. So yeah, something like that where you could share family ethnicities and family cultures and family traditions with another group would be amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Monica says she's loved Zooming with her pre-K kiddos this past month. They had a chat. They read a pigeon story, one of the pigeon books, and we all drew the pigeon. And it was precious to see them seeing each other. That's the best part about the littles doing these, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the littles are amazing.
Yeah. Christa says most engaging doing a mystery Skype with Matt. I've got a couple of those with Krista's classes. And that, there was one time we did a mystery Skype where I was teaching teachers and I wanted to bring her kids in, but they were like out on a field trip or something. So Christa was like out in the woods or something doing a video call with me, like scolding her kids if they were running away while we're trying to do this mystery Skype. It was pretty cool. So another one from Todd here. This is one of my favorite stories of his. He says, Mike Eruzione, the captain of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team, the Miracle on Ice story that's about that team. Students had the opportunity to hear his view of the experience. Can't get that in a textbook. So Mike comes back every year and Skypes into Todd's class, which is really cool. We've got Liliani here that says, my students had a session with a Canadian developer and had a chance to ask them about a day in the life of a developer. Shared interests, learning paths, and they end up convincing him to visit. Oh, wow.
That's amazing too.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Todd's got more stories. He's got a colleague, Mrs. Cami Owens, invited her student to participate in a Skype field trip to Joshua Tree National Park.
Those are beautiful.
Record it and share it for those who could not attend. And Gina, tell me what you know about this. Lots of the national parks have virtual field trip options, right?
Yes, they do. We had a virtual field trip about volcanoes once that was absolutely fabulous. We were studying volcanoes, and so we had a virtual field trip about volcanoes. We had a park ranger that talked to us all about volcanoes. We've talked to the Wild Bill Museum, and they've talked to us about explorers and forts of the early West. So anytime you're talking about any kind of westward expansion or anything like that in social studies, there was this really amazing piece where they were talking about fur trappers and traders of the Rocky Mountains, and they were explaining how little they actually carried with them. And so they were explaining how they would melt down the material in order to make their own bullets. And so they were talking about what great shots they had to be because you didn't have a lot of material to make your own bullets to begin with. And so you couldn't make them like you can buy them. And where my kids in a rural area are familiar with hunting, for my kids, that was a really interesting comparison that now you can just buy shotgun shells and you're going hunting with your family, with your friends, whoever you decide to go with. But back in the day, you actually had to melt your own material to make the bullets. And so for my kids, that was absolutely fascinating that something like that occurred at one point because I don't think they'd ever thought about it.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm going to put two more of these up real quick, and then we're going to move on to the next question. Patrick said, favorite call with my year 8 Digitech class that he used to teach was with James from an animation company called Hydrobytes, game animation for Android. Not my strength. So James showed them what he does. How cool is that? I love that. And then the last one right here, special occasion speaking and toasting via Zoom with my college students. Sounds like fun. Good stuff. So let's move on to the next question. And my I'm actually going to kind of skip over question 2. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it up here on the screen right now. If you see this question and you are encouraged to answer it, if you have something that you really want to say, go ahead. But then I'm going to put question 3 right up so we can keep moving, because I think that's going to be the really helpful one. And it's this. Why would virtual field trips and guests be a powerful addition to your class? And that could be remotely, but it could also be in a face-to-face environment. So I'm going to put that one up for just a second. Take a look at it, see if you want to answer it, because I'm going to move right on to number 3, because I think this one's going to be really helpful. Whenever I do a presentation, and Gina, I bet you've had this experience too. After you talk about this for a little while, like we've talked about some examples, and the big question everybody has at that point is where, right?
Yes.
Where do you find virtual trips and virtual guests and classrooms to connect with? We haven't even talked about that. But those are all possibilities too. So let's touch on that one for just a second. And I'm going to let everybody drop some stuff into the comments while we hear from Gina. What are some of your best places to get virtual field trips and guest speakers?
Being a Skype master teacher from the very beginning, I've always looked to Skype in the classroom for my virtual field trips and my guests. I've come across a couple in other places, but Skype in the classroom has always been my go-to for things like that, just because the sessions are thoroughly vetted and the resources are there and the lesson plans are there, and the ease of the operation for Skype in the classroom has always been incredibly intuitive and very simple to use. So that's where I've always headed to, because I've always been amazed by the things that I can find while I'm there, things I didn't even know I wanted, things that I wasn't sure how I would make them fit, have turned out to be the most amazing sessions. I've done author sessions where my kids had balked a little bit about writing in the classroom and weren't real fond of editing. And you can find some amazing authors on Skype in the classroom that will walk your kids through the editing process and really make them feel like their efforts in the classroom are actually validated and relevant. So I've always leaned towards Skype in the classroom just because they've always had such a broad selection of things that you could become involved in.
Yeah. No, I totally agree too. This is always my number one to go to. Gina, could you take the volume on your computer and turn it down just a little bit? I think I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, and it might be my own voice. So, but yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that you can see right here on the screen. And of course, what's great about it is you've got this little button that says request this session. And all you've got to do is just have a free Microsoft account, and you're able to sign up for some of them. And with some of them, they actually show you their calendar so that you can pick out a date. And then with other ones, you just send a request and you go back and forth and you set it up. And as far as getting one of these set up, Gina, it's pretty easy to do, right?
Yeah, it's generally just, I've requested the session, submitted my day and my time. The presenter has gotten back to me either email or on the Skype in the classroom site, and we have figured out a time that works for both of us. And yeah, it really is pretty simple. And those people obviously are all there because that's what they want to do and that's what they enjoy doing. And their level of professionalism and their level of speakership is pretty impressive. I've never had a bad call. Out of all of the ones that I've done, I can't think of anything where I ever got off and thought I should have probably had the kids do a worksheet instead. Never once.
Yep, absolutely. And with any of this stuff, when it comes to virtual guest speakers or virtual field trips, this is something that I know we've kind of been touting this all along, but let me just get your answer to this. This is something that would really be pretty easy to do if you're already doing video calls with your class anyway, right?
Exactly. I mean, it would not take that long to, in fact, I had a lady who reached out to me from Yellowstone National Park, and she said they'd really kind of had a drop off in their opportunities to do things like this while everybody's kind of trying to get their feet underneath them and figure out how things feel now and where we're all headed. And she said, if you're already doing calls with your kids, she said, we are open to any platform that you're using to make connections with. And so I will probably get a hold of her tomorrow and say, yeah, my kids are doing office hours and we meet every Wednesday at this time. I'd be glad to share the link with you and have you pop in and do a presentation for my kids. I think it would do my kids good to see something other than just what's outside their door or what's within the local vicinity of their homes. I really think it would do them good to see Yellowstone and feel like everything else is still out there waiting for them, even though their worlds have been reduced to something very small right now.
Yeah, definitely. Let's pull some of these answers in. We're getting some really, really good ones here. A couple of people answered the second question about why they're so important. Monica, she says, I think there would be a way to give some kids experiences that they may not get any other way, which is, yeah, totally true. And Gina, I bet you could probably follow up and agree with that, right?
Yeah, my kids being in the rural area that we're in, we're an hour away from a city either to the north or the south of us. And so my kids have gone to school with each other since before they even started school. They probably went to the same babysitters together. So the odds on my kids really coming across anybody who doesn't believe what they believe or doesn't look just like them or hasn't been in school with them already for 10 or 11 years is really, really slim. And so we're an agricultural community. So for us, it's farmers and folks like that. So for my kids to be able to travel to New York City and meet an author who lives in New York City, and the gentleman that we spoke with didn't have a car, didn't know how to drive. And my children were appalled that this grown man had no idea how to operate a car, because for us, if you can't, our kids are driving at 14 on school permits. So for our kids to meet somebody who was a grown man and a responsible adult who was paying his taxes and writing books and doing his thing, for him not to drive was something that they were completely blown away by.
Yep, absolutely. Those varied experiences. I would echo that with, my favorite example from my own classroom of using video calls was when my students in my high school Spanish class got connected to a class of kids in Valencia, Spain, who were studying English. And we talked about, what life was like there versus here. They were in Valencia, which is a very cosmopolitan city. And here we were in little Marshall, Indiana, which is about that big. And so there were all sorts of things that we could trade back and forth there, which was great. So as far as tips on where to find people, we gave you the big one, the Skype in the Classroom website. Just go to skypeintheclassroom.com. There are thousands of classes you can get connected with, hundreds of vetted guest speakers, and then dozens of virtual field trips. Gina, did we mention how much all of this stuff costs?
It is all free, which is a teacher's favorite word. And not only is it free, but it's free and it's worthwhile. I know I've seen a lot of stuff lately that's been offered to me for free. And when I've looked at it, perhaps the quality of some of those resources is not what I had expected them to be. I can personally vouch for this stuff. Like I said, I've never had a bad call yet. So it's free, it's vetted. It's amazing. The places that you can go are just absolutely astounding. And the people that you're speaking to are professional people who enjoy doing it, and their passion comes across to the kids. And that's important too, for kids to see adults in roles where they are impassioned and they are excited about what they're doing and they are willing to pass that information on and share it with others.
Yep. Okay, so let's turn to question 3, which is, what are your suggestions for finding guests and finding virtual field trips? And Laura actually dropped this one in before I asked the question, so I've been holding on to this one and waiting. She says, now's the time to connect with all the famous guests that you want, because what are they doing?
Sitting at home.
They're stuck at home, just like all of us. My students have reached out to 2 authors and both responded fairly quickly. Pretty smart. Love that. Let's see. What else do we have here? Todd says websites. Look for contact emails. I also use Twitter and phone calls. Phone calls. Do those still work?
The old cold calling.
Yeah. And he says, not everyone responds. Share them with my class and how I'd like to involve them with the lesson. I've heard people say that if you want to get a virtual guest and it's kind of a big fish, getting your students involved is
yeah.
good because it's hard to say no to kids. You know, it's easier to say no to us. Is that about right, Gina?
There you go.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Liliana says, oh, where'd she go? There she is. She says, ed camps, workshops with international speakers. While getting to know people, you can ask them to be part of class or offer a day to share with their students. That's really good. I love that. Yeah. Christa says, this is super simple. She says, just asking people. If you think of someone, just ask. That's how I got permission from Shelby Rassler to use her version of What the World Needs Now for a staff video. Interesting. That's really good. Let's see what else we've got when it comes to this. I wanted to share real fast. Oh, here, we'll put this up from Evan. Aside from the places you can go, even a mystery Skype or hangout to another school across town could have some incredible benefits. That's really true too. Gina, have you heard of people who have gotten their start or even just, dressed up a lesson by doing a video call to a nearby class?
I have actually had people that have done that on purpose. I had a friend a few years ago who flew in to visit me, and he had worked with my kids before and popped into the classroom, and they were incredibly excited because they had mystery Skyped with him before. And so they were completely into the fact that he was live in person in front of them. But yeah, mystery Skyping to any place is always a good thing. Even if it's a bad call, it's still a good thing because you can get great learning out of really awkward experiences. Some of my best learning has come out of really, really experiences that made me want to cringe. And the kids are like, oh, but this was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I can be vulnerable too. I don't always have to be in charge. We can do this. So yeah, mystery Skyping is absolutely one of the greatest ways to reach out and meet other people. We've mystery Skyped with private schools in New York City, which is always cool compared to a rural school in Iowa. Montessori schools are a lot of fun to mystery Skype with because they have such a different feel to them than ours does. So anytime that you can allow kids to understand how similar they are to each other and bring them closer and appreciate how different they are and really kind of marvel at that, I think is an opportunity well spent.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to throw out there also a tip that I learned from one of our mutual, Diane Smokrowski, who's been doing, Skype video calls with students for a long time. And she said there is a trick if you use Google and you search Twitter. So I'm going to try to show this to you over here on the screen. So I'm going to pop open a new tab.
Good, because I was trying to think of it and I couldn't get it. I'm like, I know there's
let's see if I can make this bigger. There we go. All right. Okay, so it says site : oh look, I've done this search before. Site : twitter.com. I'm doing this so that I can zoom way in on it and make it really big. Site : twitter.com. Now, what that does is that has you search Google just for results on this one site. Site : google.com, and you hit space. And then the next word is the kind of person that you're looking for. So let's say you're looking for an entomologist, somebody who studies insects. And so what you'll get on this is there's Twitter hashtag entomologist. So that could help. But then you start to get users. So now you've got this one, their Twitter handle is bug questions. I'm thinking, ooh, this might be a really good one for a guest. The carnivorous entomologist. We've got someone looking for an entomologist, the Entomological Society of America, so on and so forth. There's another one. And so what's neat about this is you click through to one of these accounts. So in this case, we're going to look at the @bugquestions one. And what you can do is start scrolling down to see how long has it been since they've tweeted. Okay, now this one hasn't tweeted since July of 2019. That one is sort of a dead account, I guess.
Yeah, we're waiting on a reply.
So, however, if we continue to go down, So let's go to this one that's an entomology professor. We'll scroll down just a little bit and see with this one retweeted somebody 7 hours ago. So they're active on Twitter, which means that they're reachable. So in that case, if you can send them a direct message, sometimes you can, even if they're not following you, send them a direct message and say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. Even if you can't do that, just do a tweet with their username at the front and send your message that way. And then it's a public tweet, and you may be surprised at who you can get. So I love that one. That one comes from Diane Smokorowski. So that's another one. Gina, do you have any other tips for finding virtual guests or guest speakers or anything?
I would say right now, if you're looking at Twitter hashtags, if you're looking at things like remote learning, distance learning, remote teaching, there's a lot of really fabulous stuff popping up right now that I've actually never seen before, that I think to myself, that is incredibly cool. I would have never thought about that. So there's a lot of people stepping forward, and there's a lot of resources being flooded out there. So I would say start watching some of those hashtags and see what you can curate out of there, because there are just a ton of opportunities right now for people who kind of empathize with what educators are going through and are sort of kind-hearted towards us at the moment, who might actually be willing to do some situations like that, especially where everybody is Zooming and Google Meeting and it's all social distancing. So it seems a little more normal, I think, to us right now, as odd as that sounds, than it might have at one point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump to this last question. We've touched on some of these other things pretty well. We'll do this one real quick, and then we'll call it a night. How about that? So here it comes, our last question. What are your best tips and tricks for successful virtual field trips and successful virtual guests? If you want to do this, what are your best tips and tricks? So Gina, what are a couple of things that come to mind for you? And then we'll start throwing some comments in from everybody else.
I like to do a little preload with my kids. So if I know we're doing a virtual field trip, or I know we're headed to a certain place to speak to a guest speaker, I like to do a little preloading with my kids. So they've gotten on a website and they've looked up some information. And so by the time that we get to actually ask our questions, we're not asking things that we could have found out if we'd have looked at it a little more closely ourselves. So I think it builds interest for the kids, gives them a little background knowledge, of course, makes the presenter feel a little bit better because you took the time to check into some things and they're not answering the same kind of routine questions that perhaps they'd been asked in the past. So I like to do a little preloading with my kids ahead of time and build up some ideas for questions and ideas for wondering. So we've got something in our banks before we sit down.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. So I think the one that is, of course, really good to mention this, because this one's come back to bite me a couple of times, is time zone issue. You know, making sure that you're on the same zone, and if you're not, that you know what time it is there and what time it is here, and being able to get on the same page. And this was especially tricky for me when I did video calls with the class over in Spain. And I learned an interesting lesson that I will share with you after the story. We found out that I think it was, what was it, like 8 hours or 10 hours for us. It was earlier in the day for us and it was later in the day for them. And it worked out just right. They went over in Spain, they went to school later in the day than we did. And so it was earlier in the day for us. It was later in the day for them. And so the time zone difference just worked out perfectly so we could both be there synchronously at the same time. However, I did find out that sometimes the time zones change in another country and they don't change here. And so I blew it on our very last call. We were supposed to have our goodbye call, our farewell call, and I blew it because I didn't check the time zone right beforehand. So learn that one from me, that the time zone thing is a big deal. And if you want to try to minimize the big time difference, because some places you could try to do a video call in another country and the time difference could be huge and it would make it really tricky to get, two classes in the same class together. I've found that if possible, if you can go north or south from where you are, obviously that's the direction that the time zones go. So for us in the United States, it's a lot easier to book something in South America than it is to book in Europe or Asia. So just another thing to think about there. So anything else that comes to mind for you, Gina?
I like to put my kids in charge of absolutely everything as much as humanly possible. So we have clocks on our wall that are set for all of the US time zones. And then we have one set for London and one set for Paris as well. And so I have the kids convert time because I have a secretary who's keeping my little kid planner. And so when the time comes for me to say, hey, are we free at blah, blah, blah? And my kids are like, what time zone is that? So my kids are very adept by the end of the year in understanding where time zones are at and who is what. So I put my kids in charge of it as much as possible. I'm a huge fan of let them figure it out on their own. I'm not a great fan of scripted anythings. So when it comes to time zones and mystery Skypes and things like that, I prefer to know as little as humanly possible and interact as little as I possibly can so my kids can really get down to the business of understanding how to work together critically and how to think about things and formulate good questions. So I think it's imperative that you don't lead too much.
Yep. Totally agree with that. Love that. Want to throw some comments up here because we've had some really good ones come in. This one's from Carly. She says, I love having my kiddos take notes in a virtual field trip journal. We can reflect and share after the trip is over. Love that one. That's great. Laura says, practice. As a softball coach, I believe in practice. So I set up a Skype or a connection with someone to test the equipment and let students get a feel for it before we connect for real. Relatives work. That's an easy one to do a video call with. So that's a good one. Monica says, my best advice is don't give up if it doesn't all work out.
No, never give up if it doesn't work out.
That's right. Take the Winston Churchill philosophy to that one, right?
Yeah.
I think Gina and I both, maybe this is a story for another day, but we both have examples of where things blew up in our face and we decided to persevere and it ended up being fine afterwards.
Some of your best failures
So
turn into your greatest lessons.
Yes, exactly. Here's another gem from Carly. She says, also, when you do a virtual field trip the first time, just go somewhere super fun and let the trip be the focus. Let them freak out and just have fun. It's an experience and just let them experience it, right? Yeah, I love that. This is a good tip. If you do a mystery Skype, where class is trying to guess each other's location, don't let your classroom clock show. And make sure your kids aren't wearing State University clothing. Funny story, that happened, I think, with Christa's class when I was doing a call with them. I had some teachers, she had her students. Here comes a kid walking onto the camera. Boom, Michigan State University. And all of the teachers are all like, like trying to muffle their laugh. So
every year the custodians try to come in and put a state flag in my classroom. And I'm like, please, it's not that I object to my state flag, but I would really like not one hanging in my classroom. And each year the custodians, bless their hearts, are like, we're going to put a state flag in your room. I'm like, please don't do that. Outside my door would be great. But
yeah, exactly. One more real quick. Group students for different tabs, app grouping, answer research group. Gina, do you want to touch on that one real quick? And then I think we're going to wrap up.
My kids have all got jobs. Absolutely every one of them. I had 29 one year and each one of them had a job. So I think it's important for kids to understand how to work together as a team. I have one kid who's a supervisor. He's in charge of everything. Everybody's got jobs and pods that they're all working in. And I think that teamwork, having a large problem and then scaling it down to a small problem is a life skill. So the sooner that they can figure out how to take something big like, what do we want to know about this, or where's this place located at, and really get some relevant, authentic, factual information that they're engaged and they are excited about, is a good thing.
Yes, totally agree. This has been such good stuff. Really, really good. Of course, if you want to follow up with Gina, she is, I've got to tell you, after knowing her for several years now, this lady is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this and a wide variety of other things too. But if you have questions, if you want to run things by her, she is so generous with her time. Go check her out on, let's see if I'm the right way, Twitter. Go right down. And Gina, you work with people there, right?
At G Ruffcorn 13. 13 is my lucky number, so.
Excellent.
But yep, at G Ruffcorn 13. Anytime, especially right now while I'm perching from my computer.
Cool.
Thank all of you for coming. How very cool.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gina, much for being our guest, for sharing your wisdom with us. It was fantastic. Hey. I think Carly says it for all of us. Gina is the best. And Evan agrees with her. He says Gina's
Evan's
biased. So this is like mutual admiration society here. So
there you go. We'll go with it. I feel good.
Yeah. That's right. So thank you all. Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us in this video. And if you like these live streams and you want to see some more of them, definitely hit that subscribe button, especially if you're on YouTube right now, hit that subscribe button and right next to it, notification whenever we go live, doing a whole these. Gina, it's awesome. Shared some really stuff here. So Gina, thank you all of you watching, and we will see you on the very Ditch That Textbook chat again on a Thursday. So